Our Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, is in the US as well. She has been discussing this plan to meet with a Chinese counterpart on the sidelines at the UN. Just how significant is it to see that sort of meeting happening more regularly now? It's not the Foreign Minister's first meeting.
Well, I said this when she had the first meeting, and that is that these are not signs of a thaw in Australia's relationship with China, but rather lowering the temperature. As you indicated, they're more regular, but they're normal. I thought we heard over the last 3 days some very good statements by the Foreign Minister and by the Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister, Richard Marles, who are basically saying that, as part of our relationships becoming more regular, Australia has to be able to lay out very clearly areas where it disagrees with China. So meetings themselves are not a concession. Meetings themselves are not an indication of a decrease in Australia's concerns about Chinese behavior, but they certainly are a positive development. It's the old Churchillian adage, jaw is better than war. And certainly in a week like the leaders of the world coming together for the UN General Assembly, it's a good time to be doing a lot of jaw-jawing.
I like that one. Gordon, domestic politics in the US, one of the big stories there today is that a federal appeals court has just restored the Justice Department's access to documents with classified markings that had been seized last month from Donald Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago. That's clearly a win for federal investigators.
It certainly is, and for the last 2 weeks, we've seen what a difficult position the former President Trump's legal team has been put into. On the one hand, you have the former president regularly asserting that he had declassified them all, and yet, because the lawyers themselves are in legal and career jeopardy if they make false claims, they're unable to assert the same things that the former president is asserting so blithely on social media. And so in this particular case, we saw a lot of toing and froing. But in the end, when you go before an actual appeals court with experienced judges, results like these are to be expected. And again, it's a part of a process. It's that, again, I'm going back to a lot of old adages today, but the notion is that the wheels of justice grind exceedingly slow, but they grind exceedingly fine. And that's exactly what's happening. We're finally working our way through this evidence.
So, Gordon, how could this saga impact the upcoming midterms and beyond that, a potential rerun by Donald Trump for president?
Well, it's interesting. 2 months now, very bad news for the former president. It has had an impact, at least in one respect. There was a poll out in Florida this week that showed current Florida Governor Ron DeSantis actually leading President Trump in the polls, and a remarkable shift in their relative fortunes. Now, obviously, that doesn't represent a nationwide poll. There's a lot of states who don't know who Ron DeSantis is, but at least in his home state, it's pretty clear that President Trump's popularity has taken a hit. I would anticipate that the more this process goes on and the more there is clarity about the events of January 6th and the president's involvement in it, and then more importantly, the events surrounding these documents, that itself, there will be a core group of MAGA never-Trumpers whose opinions will be completely unswayed by facts one way or the other. But there's a large proportion of traditional conservative Republicans and undecided voters that I think that will be impacted more.
And just finally, Gordon, earlier in the week, Joe Biden declared that the pandemic is over. I know you just recently landed in the US, but does it feel like it's done and dusted there in the US?
I was fortunate to be in the U.S. I think this is my 4th time in the course of 12 months, and it very much feels like it's over. It's a very different feel on the ground. I think everybody focused on President Biden's word over, and the reality says COVID is still a challenge. It's still a problem. The response to COVID is ongoing. But the pandemic, which means this global spread of a disease which is uncontrolled that requires a global response, that's what a pandemic is. The pandemic is over. COVID is not gone. Our requirements to respond to COVID in a responsible way as individuals and communities and societies isn't gone. And I don't think that's what the president said. He was quite clear. He's just saying the pandemic is gone. COVID's not gone.
Gordon Flake joining us from Washington, DC today. Really appreciate your analysis. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.